Welcome back to my channel. Today we're painting Zinnia. Usually I paint with round brushes, but today I'm going to do one of these florals with a flat brush and just see how that goes. I have a Pinterest board that is linked below in the description, so if you need a reference image, you can pull that up. So the petals for these are pretty short and rectangular somewhat, and so that's why I wanted to try the flat brush and see if it would make it easier to make petal shapes. If you have a flat brush or a round brush, you can also experiment and see which one you like better. So I'm starting with a light yellow and then putting in that first petal layer and leaving the center open for now. And then in the second flower, I'll be using the round brush and making it more of a pink color. As always, I tend to go light to dark, and then you can always drop in more color and saturation as you go. I'm dropping in the darker edges around the tops of the petals, and then letting the natural wet on wet bleed happen for the color blends. Okay, and then for the petals that are underneath, you'll see more just the tops of the petals. So I'm putting in those first and then dragging out a few more translucent layers just towards the center of that flower. Remember to keep some of your white spots and white area of the paper dry. That will help keep a separation between your petals and also add some definition for the lights and shadows. Okay, and the same thing for the yellow flower. I'm adding some darker orange around the edges and to the bottom layers of petals. And then using the edge of the brush to pull some of those petal shapes down towards the center. Alright, so while that dries, the first layers, we can put in the stems. They're narrow and green. I'm adding a little bit more yellow into my green as well. Okay, and then I'm starting a third flower with that same technique. This time I'm dropping in a little bit more orange into the pink and combining those two. And then for the last flower, I'll make this one more yellow. I'm putting it behind and then trying not to touch the other flowers. And then also adding a little bit of a darker color with that pinkish orange color around the edges. Okay, so referencing that Pinterest image, I can see there are a lot of foliage leaves, a lot of green leaves, a lot of stems, so I'm going to make this composition really full. So I'll just go ahead and add a bunch of leaves tucked in around these 4 florals. You can put in as many as you like. I have some overlapping and some turning and some with a side view, so have fun with it. And this is just the first layer, and then we'll add on to it once this one dries. Once it starts drying, you can start adding some lines, the veins, some shadows, and build up your layers that way. And just blend out any edges you want, and then if you want some that are sharp, let them dry without blending. Alright, so while those leaves and stems dry, I'm going to add some more layers onto the florals. This is a darker pinkish orange, and I'm dropping in the center pieces. So I'm just dotting them in a cluster right into the middle of each of the flowers. And then with just yellow, I'm making a border around each of the center areas. And because it's still a little bit wet, some of that color will bleed and mix together. Okay, now I'm using my detail brush. It's just tiny little lines to define some of these petal edges, and then I'll blend out some of them and keep some of them crisp and some soft. So if you want to soften any of your edges, you'll need to do it when the paint is still wet. So before it dries, just give your brush a rinse, and then using a clean brush, just go over it a few times and you can soften out that edge. I'm being careful to still preserve the white of the paper, so those areas that have no paint or color, they will add to the highlights of the petal. And if you do that, you'll still have some definition between your petals. If you lose the white of your paper, don't worry, you can always use a white paint that's opaque like acrylics or gouache and put some of the highlights back in. And just a quick reminder, remember to hit that subscribe button on my channel so you never miss a brand new video. Alright, while the petals dry, I'll do the same process of defining the edges on the leaves and the stems. So using some darker green paint, I'll go through, add the veins and some lines and some shadows, and then blend out a few of those edges. This is a fun part of the painting process because you can just keep adding layers. It's hard to know when to stop, so what I do is I take some breaks, I step back from the whole piece, and if I think there's an area that needs more definition, I go in, I add more shadows, blend out some layers. I also like that in this one I left the brush strokes alone, so in some areas I purposely didn't do any blending. So just go in and add your final touches and your final layers, and then we'll be done. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had a ton of fun painting. And if you like this, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.